My name is Alara Finch. For 35 years, I was the head librarian for the Port Blossom Historical Society, a quiet life lived between the hushed stacks and the gentle rustle of turning pages. My world was one of order, of narratives carefully preserved and stories told with respect for the truth. After my husband, Robert, a history professor with a love for ancient maps and a laugh that could fill a lecture hall, passed away 4 years ago, I found that the principles of my profession served me well in my personal life. I cataloged my memories, archived my grief, and took on the stewardship of the life we had built together with a quiet and diligent sense of duty. Our home, a modest but sturdy clapboard house on a street lined with live oaks dripping Spanish moss, became my sanctuary. Robert and I had bought it as newlyweds, and every scuff on the hardwood floors, every pencil mark on the doorframe tracking our children's height, was a part of our shared history. My days found a new rhythm, marked not by the Dewey Decimal System, but by the seasons in my garden. I learned the language of soil and sun, finding a profound peace in the slow, honest work of nurturing life from the earth. The garden was a place of solace, a living library of scents and colors where I could feel Robert's presence in the warmth of the sun on my back and the steady, patient unfolding of a rosebud. It was in my garden, my hands deep in the dark, rich soil, that my world, so carefully ordered, began to unravel. The call had come 3 weeks prior, shattering the afternoon calm. My daughter, Claire, and her fiancé, Julian, had announced their wedding plans. I was, of course, overjoyed for them. Claire, at 32, was a successful graphic designer, ambitious and bright, with a keen eye for aesthetics that sometimes tipped into an obsession with perfection. Julian Vance was a rising star in the volatile world of tech startups, a man who wore his ambition like a well-tailored suit and possessed a charisma that felt more engineered than innate. I had tried to like Julian for Claire's sake. I had hosted them for dinners, listened to his long monologues about market disruption and scalable solutions, and smiled through his casual dismissal of anything he deemed legacy, a category that seemed to include everything from printed books to my preference for writing letters by hand. But I saw the way Claire watched him, her expression a mixture of adoration and anxiety, as if she were constantly being graded on a curve she could never quite master. The unraveling began not with a request, but with a presentation. They had come over for Sunday lunch, armed with a glossy binder and a PowerPoint presentation on Julian's laptop. It was a budget for their wedding. The final figure, displayed in a sleek sans-serif font, was $80,000. They wanted to rent a historic waterfront estate for the weekend, fly in a celebrity chef from New York, and have a string quartet that played modern pop songs. The list went on, each item more extravagant than the last. Then came the final slide, parental contribution. Beneath it, my name, Alara Finch, and the same figure, $80,000. I remember the silence in my sun-drenched living room, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall sounding unnaturally loud. Claire, Julian, I began, my voice gentle but firm. This is a beautiful vision, truly. But this number, it's just not possible. What do you mean, not possible? Claire's tone was sharp, devoid of the warmth it usually held. Mom, you're sitting on this house, on Dad's investments. We're not asking you to be poor. We're asking you to invest in the most important day of my life. Invest, I repeated softly. The word felt clinical, transactional. Sweetheart, what Robert and I built was for our future, for my retirement. It's the safety net your father insisted upon. It's not a wedding fund. You're being selfish, she'd said, the words landing like stones. You're hoarding it all for yourself when Julian and I are trying to build a future. Don't you want me to be happy? I had tried to explain that happiness wasn't synonymous with a bespoke cocktail menu or drone photography. I'd told them I would be thrilled to give them $20,000, a sum I considered not just generous, but substantial, enough to host a lovely, memorable wedding here in Port Blossom, surrounded by the people who truly loved them. Julian had scoffed, a small, dismissive sound. Mrs. Finch, with all due respect, $20,000 might cover the floral arrangements we have in mind. We're not talking about a potluck in a church basement. This is about establishing our brand, making a statement. A statement. I looked at my daughter, the child I had taught to find beauty in a pressed flower and a well-loved book, and saw a stranger. Her eyes, usually so expressive, were hard with a calculation that chilled me to the bone. The little girl who used to trace the veins on an oak leaf with a sense of wonder was gone, replaced by a woman who spoke of her own wedding as if it were a corporate merger. The conversation ended badly, with Claire storming out and Julian following, his hand on her back in a gesture that looked less like comfort and more like management. The silence that followed had lasted for 3 long weeks, a heavy, suffocating blanket of unspoken anger and hurt. Then, the phone call. It came on a Tuesday morning as I was pruning my prize-winning camellias. Claire's voice was different, softer, tinged with a vulnerability that tugged at the frayed strings of my maternal heart. "Mom? I've been thinking. A lot. Maybe we both got a little carried away. I miss you. Can we talk? Over dinner?" Hope, that persistent, foolish weed, sprouted in my chest. Perhaps the silence had been a crucible, burning away the dross of entitlement and leaving behind something real. Perhaps the news she'd shared just before the fight, that she was pregnant, just a few weeks along, had begun to work its quiet magic, awakening in her a deeper understanding of legacy, of what it means to protect and to nurture. "I'd love that, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with relief. "I can make your favorite, the chicken pot pie with the flaky crust." "Actually," she interrupted gently, "Julian and I thought we could take you out. To celebrate a new beginning. You know that place downtown, the Gilded Tern." The Gilded Tern. The restaurant where Robert had taken me for our 30th anniversary, our last big celebration before he fell ill. It was a place of quiet elegance, with soft lighting that flattered aging skin and a hushed atmosphere that encouraged intimate conversation. It was the perfect setting for a reconciliation. Now, as I stood before my closet, my hand hovered over a simple, elegant silk dress in a shade of deep teal. I'd worn it to my retirement party from the library. It felt appropriate, a garment that represented a chapter closing, making way for a new one to begin. I dressed with care, the familiar ritual a small act of faith. As I fastened the pearl necklace Robert had given me, I allowed myself to believe. Maybe my daughter was coming back to me. Maybe this grandchild was the bridge we needed to find our way back to each other. The drive to the Gilded Tern was a journey through a gallery of memories. I passed the public library where I'd first taught Claire the magic of a library card, her small hand clutching it like a golden ticket. I passed the park where Robert had patiently taught her to ride a bicycle, his hand letting go for a breathtaking moment as she wobbled forward on her own. Each landmark was a poignant reminder of the love we had shared. The foundation, I believed, was strong enough to withstand this recent, terrible quake. The restaurant was as beautiful as I remembered. A restored 19th century bank, its marble columns and soaring ceilings spoke of a bygone era of grace and permanence. A hostess with a warm smile led me to a secluded corner booth. Claire was already there, a vision in a cream-colored maternity dress that was both simple and breathtakingly expensive. The soft glow from the table lamp illuminated her face, and for a moment, all I could see was my beautiful girl. "Mom." She stood and embraced me, and the familiar scent of her perfume, a light floral I'd bought her for her college graduation, was almost enough to erase the past 3 weeks. For that one moment, I was just a mother holding her child. "You look radiant, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it. Pregnancy agreed with her. "How are you feeling?" "Much better now. The second trimester is a relief." She rested a hand on her still small belly, a gesture of unconscious protection. "Julian should be here any second. He had a last-minute call with an investor." "I'm so glad you called," I said, sliding into the plush velvet of the booth. "I've missed you terribly." A flicker of something, guilt? Regret, crossed her face, but it was gone before I could name it. Before she could respond, Julian appeared at our table. But he was not alone. Flanking him were 2 men in dark, impeccably tailored suits, both carrying sleek leather briefcases. They moved with the silent, predatory grace of sharks. "Elara," Julian said, his smile a little too wide, too practiced. "So good of you to join us." The men took their seats, one on either side of Julian, effectively boxing me in. The intimate dinner for three had become a corporate boardroom. My stomach, which had been fluttering with nervous hope, clenched into a tight, cold knot. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was an ambush. "Claire," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Who are these gentlemen?" "Mom, this is Marcus Thorne and David Chin," she said, her voice steady, but her gaze fixed on the water glass in front of her. "They're associates of Julian's." The older of the two men, Marcus Thorne, leaned forward. He had silver hair and the kind of unnervingly direct gaze that I recognized from dealing with the library's board of directors. "Mrs. Finch, it's a pleasure. We've prepared some documents that we believe will be mutually beneficial for the entire family." The air grew thick and still. The gentle clinking of silverware and the murmur of other diners faded into a dull roar in my ears. The cold knot in my stomach tightened. This wasn't about the wedding anymore. This was about something far more sinister. "What kind of documents?" I asked, my voice betraying none of the tremor I felt inside. I already knew on some deep, intuitive level, but I needed to hear them say it. Julian cleared his throat, taking charge. "It's quite simple, Alara. We're proposing a more formal arrangement for managing your assets. A power of attorney." "My assets?" I repeated, my voice quiet. "Given your age," he continued, his tone dripping with condescension, "and the complexities of modern financial markets, it only makes sense to have someone with more expertise ensuring your portfolio is optimized for growth. We want to make sure you're taken care of, that you don't have to worry about these things." "My age," I said again, letting the words hang in the air. "I am 66 years old, Julian. I managed the acquisitions budget for a major historical society for 35 years. I think I can handle my own checkbook." Of course," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "But this is about maximizing potential. It's about leveraging your assets to create generational wealth. For Claire. For the baby." I looked at my daughter, my heart aching with a silent plea. "Say something. Stop this. Tell me this isn't you." But she remained silent, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her profile a mask of perfect neutrality. Marcus Thorne slid a handsome leather-bound folder across the polished mahogany table. "If you'll just review these and sign at the indicated tabs, we can have everything filed by the end of the week." I opened the folder. The dense legal jargon swam before my eyes, but the headings were clear enough. Durable power of attorney. Healthcare proxy. Transfer of title. They wanted everything. The house Robert and I had paid off over 30 years. The investment portfolio he had built with such meticulous care. My life, my choices, my independence, all to be signed away in a tastefully appointed restaurant. I closed the folder gently. "And if I don't sign?" I asked, my gaze fixed on my daughter. Claire finally looked at me. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by a chillingly final expression I had never seen before. It was the look of someone who had made a calculation and was prepared to accept the outcome, no matter the cost. "Then you'll have to understand our position," she said, her voice as cool and smooth as the marble columns around us. "We can't have someone who is uncooperative in our child's life. It wouldn't be a stable environment." Her hand went to her belly again, but this time it felt like a threat, not a promise. "It's your choice, Mom. Sign the papers and be a part of your grandchild's life. Or don't, and we'll have to make other arrangements." The world tilted. The soft lighting seemed to dim, the air growing thin and cold. This woman, my child, was threatening to sever me from my own grandchild, a being I hadn't even met yet, using the baby as a bargaining chip to seize control of my life. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt, the shock, the grief, they were still there, but they receded, replaced by a surge of cold, clear anger. It was the quiet, focused fury of a librarian who has just found a priceless manuscript being used as a coaster. It was the indignation of a gardener watching someone trample her most tender seedlings. I took a slow, deep breath. I reached into my purse, my hand moving past my wallet, past my reading glasses, past the small, worn photo of Claire and her brother, Leo, as children. My fingers closed around my phone. "Mom," Claire said, a note of warning in her voice. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. I didn't answer. I scrolled through my contacts to the one I needed. I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear, my eyes never leaving my daughter's face. "Leo, darling, it's Mom," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I'm so sorry to bother you at the hospital. I need you to come to the Gilded Turn downtown." "Yes, now. It's important." I listened for a moment. "Just come. Please." I ended the call and placed the phone on the table next to the leather-bound folder. I looked at Julian, at his lawyers, and then back at my daughter. "I believe," I said, my voice resonating with an authority I hadn't used since my days running the library, "that we'll be waiting for one more person to join our little meeting before I sign anything." The silence that descended on our table was absolute. Julian's practiced smile had vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped irritation. Marcus Thorne and David Chin exchanged a glance, the kind of subtle communication that happens between professionals when a well-laid plan goes awry. They were predators who had misjudged their prey, and the uncertainty was beginning to show. "Mom," Claire said, her voice losing its icy edge and taking on the wheedling tone she'd used as a teenager when she wanted to borrow the car. "There's no need to drag Leo into this. This is a private family matter." "Is it?" I folded my hands on the table, surprised by their steadiness. "It seems to me that when you bring two lawyers to a reconciliation dinner, it stops being private. You've already involved quite a few people, sweetheart." Marcus Thorne cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. "Mrs. Finch, perhaps this has all been a bit of a shock. Family finances can be an emotional topic. Can they?" I met his gaze without flinching. "How astute of you to notice. 22 minutes. That's how long it would take Leo to get here from the hospital if he caught the lights. 22 minutes in which I had to hold my ground on this battlefield my daughter had chosen." Julian leaned forward, his salesman persona rebooting. "Look, Alara, may I call you Alara? We're all family here. You may call me Mrs. Finch." His jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. "Of course, Mrs. Finch. I think you're misunderstanding our intent. We're not trying to take anything. We're simply offering our expertise to help you manage your assets. To protect you." "Protect me from what, precisely?" "From the unforeseen. Market downturns. Bad advice. The challenges of aging." I looked at my daughter, who was now studying the intricate pattern of the tablecloth. "Tell me, Claire, when did you decide I needed this level of protection? Was it before or after you called me to say you missed me?" She lifted her chin, a flash of Robert's stubbornness in the line of her jaw, but twisted into something ugly. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." "Fine," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to draw a glance from the adjacent table. "We've been exploring options for weeks. Ever since you made it clear you didn't care about my happiness or the security of your own grandchild." "Options," I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. "Is that what we're calling this? An option?" "It's not extortion, if that's what you're implying," she said, her voice rising. "It's what families do. They support each other." "What families do," I said, my own voice dropping to a near whisper, "is love each other without conditions. They don't hold their own children hostage for financial gain." A voice, calm and steady, cut through the tension. "Is everything all right here?" I looked up to see Leo standing beside our table, still in his pale blue hospital scrubs, his dark hair slightly disheveled. At 35, my son had Robert's solid, reassuring presence and my sharp, observant eyes. As an ER physician, he was accustomed to walking into chaos and assessing it in an instant. "I believe you were expecting me, Mom," he said, his gaze sweeping over the table, taking in the lawyers, the folder, my face, and the defiant set of his sister's jaw. "I was," I said, a wave of profound relief washing over me. "Leo, I'd like you to meet some of Julian's associates." Julian stood, extending a hand. "Julian Vance, Claire's fiancé. A pleasure." Leo shook his hand briefly, his eyes cold. He didn't acknowledge the lawyers. He pulled up a chair and sat between me and Claire. "Financial planning," he said, his voice laced with irony as he glanced at the folder. "Over dinner at the Gilded Turn? How very thorough of you all." He turned to his sister. "You look pale, Claire. Are you feeling all right? Any complications with the pregnancy?" I'm fine, Leo, she mumbled, her confidence visibly shrinking under his scrutiny. Good. That's good to hear. He picked up the leather-bound folder and flipped through it, his expression unreadable. Power of attorney. Impressive. He closed it and set it down decisively. Mom, did you request assistance managing your financial affairs? I did not. I see. He looked at Julian and the lawyers. Gentlemen, would you mind giving my mother and me a moment alone? Now, see here, Julian began, but Leo cut him off. I'm not asking. There was a quality in my son's voice, the quiet, absolute authority of a doctor in charge of a trauma bay, that brooked no argument. Julian looked to Claire for support, but she was staring at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. Marcus Thorne, ever the professional, stood smoothly. We'll be at the bar. Mrs. Finch, please, take your time. Don't make any rash decisions. Once they were out of earshot, Leo leaned forward. Mom, tell me what's happening. The truth. For the first time all evening, my composure wavered. Tears pricked my eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. The simple, profound relief of being seen, of being believed. They want me to sign over power of attorney, I whispered. Claire said if I don't, I won't be allowed to see the baby. Leo was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming a soft, rhythmic pattern on the table. It was a habit he'd had since childhood, something he did when he was working through a complex diagnosis. How much did they ask for the wedding? 80,000. He let out a low whistle. And you offered 20, which was more than generous. He glanced toward the bar, where Julian was gesticulating angrily to his lawyers. Mom, I need you to be honest with me. Are you having any trouble? Forgetting things? Any confusion? I almost laughed. Leo, last week I cross-referenced 3 19th century maps to help the Historical Society identify an unmarked burial ground. The week before that, I renegotiated my homeowner's insurance and saved $600. Does that sound like a woman who's losing her faculties? No, he said, his jaw tightening in a way that so powerfully reminded me of his father. It sounds like the woman who taught me how to budget so meticulously that I finished medical school with almost no debt. He looked across the restaurant at his sister. What happened to her, Mom? When did she become this person? It was the question that had haunted my waking hours and my dreams. When had my daughter's ambition soured into such corrosive greed? When had her heart become so hard? I don't know, I admitted, my voice catching. Maybe I gave her too much. Maybe I made life too easy. Or maybe, I added, following his gaze, maybe Julian Vance happened to her. He's a catalyst, Leo said, his diagnostic mind at work. But Claire is 32 years old. She's making her own choices. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. The only question that matters right now is, what do you want to do? Before I could answer, the phalanx was returning from the bar, Julian in the lead, his face set in a mask of grim determination. Claire trailed behind them, her hand once again pressed to her stomach in that gesture that now seemed entirely performative. I'm sorry to interrupt, Julian said, his voice sharp with impatience. But we're on a schedule. There are vendors that require deposits. Of course, I said, rising slowly from my seat. Schedules. Timelines. How very practical of you. I picked up my purse. The whole restaurant seemed to be holding its breath, the air thick with our drama. I've considered your proposal. And I've made my decision. A wave of visible relief washed over Julian's face. Claire's shoulders sagged slightly. Even Marcus Thorne allowed himself a small, triumphant smile. I will sign, I said. Then I took a deep breath and continued, my voice clear and carrying in the hushed room. But first, I believe there's someone else who should be a part of this conversation. I pulled out my phone again. Julian's face clouded with confusion. Who now? I scrolled to a different number, one I had added to my contacts 2 weeks ago, after a long, difficult conversation in a quiet law office downtown. It was a call I had hoped I would never have to make. B? I said when the crisp, no-nonsense voice answered. It's Alara Finch. Yes, I'm afraid it's time. The Gilded Turn on Market Street. Please bring the portfolio we prepared. I placed the phone back on the table. The shift in the room's atmosphere was palpable. Who, Julian demanded, is B? Beatrice Gallo, I said pleasantly. My attorney. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than before. It was the silence of a chessboard after a move that changes the entire game. Marcus Thorne's professional veneer cracked, his eyes narrowing as he reevaluated the opponent he had so badly underestimated. Your attorney? Claire whispered, her face ashen. Since when do you have an attorney? Since the day Julian started interviewing my neighbors, I said, my voice still conversational. I looked at him directly. Did you really think Mrs. Gable from next door wouldn't tell me about the charming young man who stopped by to ask if I'd been seeming forgetful lately? Or that my mailman wouldn't mention you asking if my bills were being paid on time? Leo swore softly under his breath. Claire, my God. It's not what you think, she stammered, but the words were hollow. Isn't it? I reached into my purse and pulled out a simple manila envelope, sliding its contents onto the table. Not legal documents, but something far more damning. There were glossy photographs of my house, taken from the street. Printouts of emails between Julian and a private investigator he'd hired. A copy of a background check he had run on me. My attorney, Beatrice, is also a very good friend. And she's very thorough, I explained. It turns out that when you start systematically building a case to have someone declared incompetent, you leave a trail. David Chin, the younger lawyer, was visibly sweating. Mrs. Finch, I assure you, our firm was not aware of any of these preliminary activities. Oh, I'm sure you weren't, I said. But you are now. Beatrice Gallo arrived less than 10 minutes later. She was a woman in her late 60s, elegant and formidable, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She strode to our table with the confidence of a woman who had spent 40 years dismantling bullies in courtrooms. Ilara, she said warmly, placing a hand on my shoulder before turning her cool, appraising gaze on the rest of the table. Julian, Claire, and gentlemen, I assume you're Mr. Thorne and Mr. Chin. I'm Beatrice Gallo. She set her own handsome briefcase on the table. I believe you have some documents you'd like my client to sign. This is a private family matter, Ms. Gallo, Marcus Thorne said, attempting to reclaim some professional high ground. I agree, B said smoothly. Which is why I'm here to protect my client from a predatory familial situation. She opened her briefcase. Now, before we discuss this power of attorney, which we will not be signing, I'd like you all to see the documents Mrs. Finch executed last week. She laid out a series of papers, crisp and official, stamped with the seal of the county court. I watched Julian's face as he read the title on the top page, his expression shifting from arrogance to confusion to raw, undisguised panic. An irrevocable trust be announced to the table. The Finch Family Legacy Trust. All of Mrs. Finch's major assets, this house, the investment portfolio, the insurance policies, were transferred into it last Tuesday. But who are the beneficiaries? Claire asked, her voice trembling as she read over Julian's shoulder. You and your brother, Leo, are the income beneficiaries for your lifetimes, Bea explained calmly. The principal, however, is preserved for the ultimate beneficiaries, your children. All of them. Born and unborn. She smiled faintly. And the trustee, with sole discretion over all distributions, is Leo. The implication landed in the center of the table like a grenade. Julian could not touch the money. Claire could not touch the money. It was protected, untouchable, preserved for a generation Julian had tried to use as a bargaining chip. What about the wedding? Julian sputtered, his composure finally shattering. What about our life? Our plans? What about them? Bea replied, her voice cool. The trust allows for distributions for health, education, and maintenance. I'm quite certain an $80,000 wedding does not fall under any of those categories. Nor, she added, her eyes glinting, does an Italian marble bathroom renovation. You can't do this, he raged, turning on me. She's your daughter. You're cutting her off. I'm not cutting her off, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm cutting you out. I am protecting my daughter's inheritance from her fiancé. Bea Gallo gathered her papers. Mr. Vance, she said, her tone suddenly glacial. Given the evidence we've collected regarding your attempts to manufacture a case for my client's incompetence, Not to mention your potential misuse of your firm's resources to investigate your future mother-in-law. I highly recommend you consult with your own legal counsel. Things could get very unpleasant for you. Professionally. Marcus Thorne and David Chin were already on their feet, stuffing their documents back into their briefcases as if they were contaminated. We appear to have been misinformed as to the nature of this family dispute, Thorne said stiffly. We retract our services. They practically fled from the table. Julian stood there, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Claire had collapsed into her seat, her face in her hands, weeping. They were not tears of remorse, I suspected, but of defeat. I stood, my legs a little shaky but holding. Leo put a protective arm around me. I looked down at my daughter, this stranger who wore her face. Claire, I said softly. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and lost. When you're ready to talk to me, just you, alone about this baby, about being a mother, about what family really means, you have my number. But this version of you, the one who sits here tonight? I don't know her. And frankly, I don't wish to. I turned to Julian. As for you, I said, and my voice held 66 years of quiet strength. Stay away from my son. Stay away from my house. Stay away from my family. Leo threw a $100 bill on the table to cover whatever they had ordered. As we walked away, I could hear Julian's voice, raw and angry, hissing at Claire. The sound of their shared dream imploding followed us out into the cool, sweet air of the Port Blossom night. Standing on the sidewalk under the soft gaslight, with Leo on one side and Bea on the other, I looked up at the star-dusted sky. I felt hollowed out, exhausted, but also light. How are you, Alara? Bea asked gently. I thought for a moment, breathing in the scent of salt and jasmine from the nearby harbor. Free, I said. For the first time in a very long time, I felt completely and utterly free. 6 months later, the Tuesday evening support group I'd started was in full swing in the community center's sunniest room. We called ourselves the Archivists, a nod to my old profession. Our mission was to help one another preserve our own stories, our dignity, and our assets. There were 12 of us now, a small but resilient band of survivors. The aftermath of that night at the Gilded Tern had been swift. Julian, facing an internal investigation at his company and the loss of his anticipated windfall, had vanished from Claire's life within a month. Claire had downsized her wedding plans and, I heard through Leo, was now living in a small apartment and attending therapy. My own life had blossomed in unexpected ways. My friendship with Bea had deepened. I had reconnected with old friends from the library. And I had discovered a new purpose in this circle of folding chairs, listening to stories of betrayal and helping people find the language of boundaries. Tonight, a new woman, frail and elegant, spoke for the first time. I just don't know how to stop loving the son I thought I had, she whispered, tears tracking through her carefully applied makeup. How do you mourn someone who is still alive? The question hung in the room, familiar to us all. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated in my purse. A text from Leo. She's here. A girl. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Both are healthy. They named her Eleanor. Eleanor. My mother's name. A name synonymous with strength, grace, and unwavering integrity. It was another calculated move, another chess piece placed on the board. A week ago, it might have angered me. Tonight, it just made me sad for my daughter, who still believed love could be leveraged. After the meeting, I drove home not to the big family house, which I had sold to a young family who promised to cherish it, but to a sunny little cottage by the marsh. It was all mine. The garden was smaller, more manageable, filled only with the flowers I loved most. I sat on my screened-in porch, watching the tide slowly come in, the sky painted in shades of rose and lavender. The birth of my granddaughter was not a summons. It was not a command. It was simply a fact. A new life had entered the world, innocent of the drama that preceded her. I thought of the letter I had written to Claire a month ago, a letter I hadn't sent, but kept in my desk drawer. It was not a letter of anger or forgiveness, but one of clarity. I went inside and took it out. I read it one last time, then found an envelope and a stamp. Dearest Claire, it began. I am writing to you not as the woman you ambushed at the Gilded Tern, but as the mother who held you when you had a fever, who read you stories until she was hoarse, and who will always, on some deep, elemental level, love you. I know that love has been tested. It has been bruised and battered, and it cannot continue in the way it once did. That version of us is gone. I wish you peace, and I wish you healing. I hope, one day, you will find a happiness that doesn't need to be funded or validated by others. I hope you become a mother your daughter can be proud of. As for me, I have found a different kind of peace. I am building a new life, one based on respect, honesty, and firm boundaries. It is a quiet life, but it is my own. If, one day, you wish to enter this life, the door is not locked. But the price of admission is truth. It is remorse. It is the hard, honest work of rebuilding what you shattered. There will be no shortcuts, no manipulations, no financial negotiations. There will only be the slow, patient work of finding our way back to something real. Until then, know that I wish you well. And know that I will be thinking of my granddaughter, Eleanor. I will hold a space for her in my heart, a safe and loving space she is welcome to enter whenever her mother is ready to show her the way. Honestly. With love and with boundaries. Mom. I sealed the envelope and placed it on the small table by the door, ready for the morning mail. Outside, the last light of day faded, and the first star appeared in the darkening sky. I did not know what the future held. I did not know if Claire would ever do the work required to heal our fractured bond. But for the first time, I knew that my own happiness was not contingent on her choices. I had drawn my own map. I had curated my own story. And it was a story of a woman who had learned, late in life, the most valuable lesson of all, that the most important thing to preserve is not a house or a portfolio, but oneself. And in that quiet, sturdy truth, I found not an ending, but a new and brilliant beginning.